All right, so welcome to our June workshop on the topic of funding and financing. And this is our final workshop in our series for this study. So excited to share this information with you today as we wrap up this series. Next slide, please. So yeah, as I said, we're in June somehow already, and today we'll be talking about costs of electric school buses and funding and financing. And I'll just walk quickly through the agenda on the next slide. So first going to hand it over to Alice from WRI to talk about federal funding and total cost of ownership. And then we'll hand it over to Orly from MAPC to talk about state funding and technical assistance. And then finally, we'll have Mary from the Upper Cape Technical School talk about their experience. We'll have some time for discussion, Q&A, and then some wrapping up of this workshop series. So with that, I will pass it over to Alice. I cannot hear you. I don't know if others are.
Are folks able to hear me now?
Yes, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, sorry, I've been having some issues with my headphones recently. Yeah, thank you so much, Allie, for that introduction, and happy to be here, everyone. My name is Alice. I am with WRI's Electric School Bus Initiative. I work on their state policy team, and today I'm happy to talk about the total cost of ownership more generally and specifically to Massachusetts, as well as present some federal opportunities to you all. Okay, next slide. Awesome. So what is total cost of ownership? Essentially, long story short, total cost of ownership is the total costs, expenses that go into procuring and also operating and maintaining an electric school bus, or in our case, an electric school bus. So as you can see here, year zero is when you procure that bus, and then for the lifetime of that bus, there's fuel, battery management, maintenance costs that obviously go into all of that. So that is all incorporated into the total cost of ownership. And if you don't mind going to the next slide. These are a few of the components that we consider when we do our calculations here at WRI for total cost of ownership. Some of the things I mentioned earlier, so fuel and energy costs, expected lifetime of the vehicle, so on and so forth. So nothing to go into detail here, but just wanted to present this to folks. Next slide, please. And then these are a few of the assumptions that WRI is currently using. Again, I won't get into the nitty gritty and all of this for the sake of time, but yeah, just some of the numbers we're using. We're using 2023 bus prices and in the process of updating some of these assumptions as well. So next slide. All right, so moving on to the actual total cost of ownership for Massachusetts. Again, total cost of ownership is both the upfront cost, which is the blue box here, as well as operational costs, maintenance costs, fuel costs, which is the orange box there. And then that gray box is infrastructure, operational maintenance costs as well. So total cost of ownership would be all of the bars added together for either diesel or electric. So TCO, the total cost of ownership for an ESB versus the TCO of a diesel bus has a little bit of a price difference. And the biggest reason for that is that blue box there, the upfront cost, $113,000 versus $375,000. Again, these are prices that we are regularly trying to update. So this TCO could look different in the future, but as of now, this is where we are. And one important note I want to make here is that although that upfront cost there's a little bit of a cost difference there, there are plenty of federal programs that are currently live that folks can tap into to help reduce that upfront cost. Because in the end, if you look at the orange box there, the fuel maintenance costs, it's a lot cheaper for an electric school bus long run. So over the course of a lifetime of the bus, electric school buses are a lot more cost efficient. Um, moving on to, oh, sorry, previous slide. I just wanted to explain some of the stats there. Okay, awesome, thank you. So the upfront premium is essentially the difference between the upfront costs of a diesel and electric school bus, and that comes out to, so the two blue boxes there, that comes out to be roughly 262,000. And then the lifetime premium is the difference between the TCOs as a whole. So that 567 versus 435,000. And operational savings is the difference between the orange boxes. So we would see around 153,000 in operational savings. Next slide, please. And so this is just an example of what TCO or how TCO would change with incentives put in place or other funding structures put in place to help offset that upfront cost. So there is currently a tax incentive, or tax credit, which I'll talk about more in a few slides, called 45W, and that's essentially a tax credit that provides $40,000 maximum per electric school bus to help offset those costs. So as you can see here, the blue box is, the TCO for an ESB essentially goes down by that $40,000. So it's no longer 567, now it's 527,000. The diesel stays the same. And so that upfront premium, the lifetime premium changes because that blue box has changed. And operational savings stay the same. So this is a classic example of how when paired with the proper incentives and funding structures, like the Clean School Bus Program, which I'm sure plenty of people here have learned about, talked about, as well as other federal structures and existing state funding that's available. We could be saving, or this could help the TCO hundreds of thousands of dollars to help kind of equalize that cost. So that's just a classic example there. If you don't mind going to the next slide. And then this is just to really emphasize the operational savings of an electric school bus versus a diesel bus. So with the electric school bus, I mean, there are a lot of things to consider there, but first of all, the maintenance and repair of an electric school bus is a lot more routine, and the degradation is a lot. It's a lot more regular. I think with diesel, it's a little bit more unpredictable based on the fuel type. So with that said, there are a lot of operational and repair costs that you'll be saving in the long term. So just really wanted to highlight that point. Next slide, please. And this is an interesting graph here talking about something called TCO parity. And TCO parity is essentially when we expect the total cost of ownership for an electric school bus to be the same as a diesel bus. And normally, depending on the funding structures that are available to folks, the electric school bus is, the TCO of an electric school bus will be less than a diesel bus. This was in a scenario that we did that was specifically to 45W, which is that the tax credit I talked about earlier. The tax credit is set to expire 2032. It's live now. It's set to expire by 2032, which is when we expect to see parity. And we see a jump in that purple line there, which is the ESB TCO, because that 45W expires. But as you can see, it still naturally declines based off of various market forces. So just something to consider, and highlights the importance of tapping into as many funding federal funding opportunities as well as state funding opportunities when available. So that is the TCO parity there. And for fleet electrification costs, these are just a few things to consider when trying to assess how much it's going to be to electrify a fleet. So the first being, how big of a fleet are you trying to electrify, as well as what existing programs are there to help with those costs. To help, there are some programs that may want to, or that may help cover full upfront costs, or maybe just partial upfront costs. It depends. Or maybe that lifetime premium between an electric and diesel school bus as well. So a lot of different ways to go about setting up those programs. Also, you'll want to be intentional about defining disadvantaged communities. So there are a lot of different criteria you can use to set up your priority criteria when setting up a program. So also states usually have different definitions of disadvantaged communities, as do many federal programs. So trying to figure out what the best definition is something to consider as well. As well as the replacement rate programs, usually they set their replacement rates. I don't want to say it's arbitrary, but the average is around 7%, although we've been pushing for 10%. And replacement rate is essentially how fast are you replacing your fleet, your diesel buses with electric school buses. So another factor to consider, as well as setting aside funds for workforce development and technical assistance with the programs that are being created. So just some things to consider when determining how much it's going to cost to electrify a fleet. So next slide, please. So now I'm going to talk about some funding opportunities, and apologies for going a little quick. I'm just trying to fit everything into that time limit there. So the biggest one that many folks are aware of right now is the EPA Clean School Bus Program. It's a $5 billion allocated for that program, and there have been 3 rounds awarded so far. Another round we're expected to hear, I think, sometime in the fall. So we'll see if that one's a grant round or a rebate round. But yeah, a lot of great work has been done there so far. I think about 3 billion has been awarded. So a lot of great work done there. There are other federal opportunities. Oh, sorry, I'm skipping over to the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle Program, which is open now. I'm going to talk more about this in just a little bit, but it's $1 billion set aside for clean heavy duty vehicles, with a significant portion allocated specifically for school buses. Other federal programs including DARA and USDA programs. There is, so DARA is the Diesel Emissions Reduction Act, which provides federal funding for school buses, as well as there is the USDA Community Facilities Loan and Grant Program, which can also be applied to ESVs. So, and then some existing state programs, which I'm sure MAPC will be talking more about, and tax credits, which are available now. And if you don't mind going to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit more about those tax credits. So there's actually, WRI is hosting a webinar as we speak on the tax credits and elective pay. I'll be sure to send around a recording once I have my hands on that for folks to take a look at, but it goes really in depth into this opportunity, way more than I'll probably go over today. And I can connect you guys with our in-house tax expert. She doesn't provide actual tax advice, but she knows a lot about these tax credits, which is great. So yes, the tax credits come out of the IRA and has established language for tax exempt entities to now access tax credits, also known as elective pay, so that you guys can, so school districts, state, local governments, tribal governments, so on and so forth, who previously wouldn't have been eligible for these tax credits to now receive them. Next slide, please. Okay, so the 2 tax credits right now are 45W and 30C. 45W is specific to procuring electric school buses and provides up to a max of $40,000 per school bus. 30C is specifically for chargers and provides up to $100,000 per charging unit and installation. And both are eligible for direct slash elective pay. Next slide, please. This goes a little bit more into depth on 45W. So there are two criteria by which you could, or two amounts by which you could be getting the tax credit, and it'll be the lesser of the two. You could either get 30% of the cost, the base cost of an electric school bus, or the incremental cost of a comparable vehicle. So the max you can get is 40,000, and how much you get is dependent on those two criteria there. There's no geographic restrictions, and this is more of a specific note here, but when determining incremental cost, there is the ability to make independent determinations on what that incremental cost looks like, if not using the Department of Education, or sorry, Department of Energy's determinations there. So next slide, please. 30C, so this is specific to charging infrastructure, which includes bidirectional charging equipment, which is very, very exciting. And for folks who aren't aware, bidirectional charging is where essentially a unit that charges an electric school bus, but also similarly, if there's extra energy or electricity in a bus, can go back to charging that unit, and that unit can charge something else. So that's bidirectional charging. So for this credit, again, it's up to $100,000 per charging unit for school districts, specifically in low-income communities and non-urban areas, to help meet those equity criteria. So there's feel free to check out that link there. I'm sure these slides will be sent around. So to see if you're eligible for that 30C tax credit. Next slide, please. And yes, so again, like I said, we have some resources that are live on our page, as well as that recording that I'll send around after this webinar today. Next slide, please. And the other program I'd love to talk about is the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicles program. This is a really exciting opportunity for school districts to pursue funding if they're looking to electrify their school bus fleet. And it's also a part of the IRA. Congress authorized nearly $1 billion to replace Class 6 and 7 vehicles, which includes school buses, with zero emission options. School districts, states, U.S. territories, municipalities, tribes, and nonprofit school transportation associations can all apply. This is a grant process and closes July 25th. So it's coming up. So 70% of the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle funds will support school bus replacement projects under the school bus sub-program, while 30% will support other vehicle types. And the EPA anticipates making 40 to 160 awards total, awarding at least 15 of those awards to applicants from tribes and territories. At least 400 million of the total funds will be dedicated to projects serving non-attainment areas under the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, or NAAQS. An additional priority will be given to projects serving disadvantaged communities based on indicators from certain equity screening tools such as EJ Screen and CEJST, and certain air quality measures. And EPA provides a list, which I can provide after this webinar as well. I also want to note that this is different from the Clean School Bus program, which I mentioned earlier. That program has been going on for a little bit, since 2022, and has already awarded nearly $3 billion in grants and rebates to school districts. And I can also, again, provide a link for folks to navigate if interested in learning more. We recently did a webinar on this program as well. And so we have slides and recordings available for folks, which I'll include in that follow-up. But that is the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle program. If you go to the next slide, we do have a tools page. We have a recently, I think this was just made live earlier last week, or maybe earlier this week, on our website specific to this opportunity, and help support people through the application process. We have weekly office hours and periodic email updates. So feel free to reach out with any questions or concerns. But yeah, that's it for my presentation today. So I actually have to hop off, but if people have any questions or concerns or really anything, feel free to reach out to me. Ali will share my contact information. Thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Alice. And yeah, we can coordinate via email if any other questions come up. So thank you so much. And now I will turn it over to Orly.
Thanks, Allie. Yeah, thank you for having us. We're just going to chat a little bit about some state funding opportunities and technical assistance. You can move to the next slide. So I guess I should introduce myself. I'm Orly from the Massachusetts Clean Energy Center at MAPC on the Clean Transportation team. And just for those who are maybe less familiar with MAPC, we're a state economic development agency. So what this effectively means is that we run sort of smaller scale pilot and demonstration projects with the hope that learnings from these projects can then translate to a statewide kind of rebate or grant program. So we have a few different focus areas, but all of our school bus electrification programming comes out of the Clean Transportation team. Next slide, please. Thanks. So I did want to just give a little bit of context, and I'll move through this pretty quickly, but for the Massachusetts electric school bus landscape, mostly just wanted to highlight that we get questions quite often about whether or not school districts that work with a third-party fleet operator are eligible or good candidates for electrification program, excuse me. So I did just want to highlight that we have about half of the schools that we work with are partnered with third-party operators, and this includes smaller kind of mom and pop shop operators, as well as operators that span across North America. So it's definitely something that's possible. And then we're also seeing the number of electric school buses on the road have been growing, pretty impressively, I would say, over the last few years since the Clean School Bus program. Next slide, please. So I will probably focus today mostly on our MAPC programming, the ACT School Bus program, but I also did want to highlight a few other state programs and programs kind of available through the state. So one is the Department of Energy Resources, DOER, has a program, MOREV, and it's broken up by different vehicle classes, so focusing on class 3 through 8. This is a rebate program, and it's essentially a direct incentive program. So if you purchase an electric bus and you're an eligible entity, you can receive up to a certain amount back from DOER, depending on your vehicle weight class. And then also the utilities, including National Grid and Eversource, primary utilities in Massachusetts, have a few different programs that we really suggest school districts look into, including off-peak charging programs and incentives for electric vehicle supply equipment. And then, of course, MAPC has the Accelerating Clean Transportation School Bus, or ACT School Bus program, which is both a grant program, but also an advisory and technical assistance program. So the main goal of our program is really to accelerate electric school bus adoption in Massachusetts, but we're really focused on amplifying the Clean School Bus program and the heavy duty vehicle program as well. So just a little bit more on MOREV, and put this in the slide just so folks can maybe come back to this. There are a decent number of vouchers remaining in this very first block group tier. So you can just kind of take a look at the gross vehicle weight requirements. And I just did want to highlight that school districts are eligible applicants to this program. One quick thing on MOREV is that if you're applying for a vehicle to receive a MOREV rebate, you should just be aware that you can't stack that funding with other state funding. So you either have MOREV for that vehicle or another state funding source for that particular vehicle. And then the utilities, again, National Grid and Eversource, wanted to highlight their Make Ready programming. So probably people are fairly familiar with Make Ready, but it is a program that provides funding and assistance for charging installation and the chargers themselves for school districts in National Grid or Eversource territory. For districts that have municipal light plants, often the municipal light plants have their own sort of support they can offer. And you can check on the National Grid or Eversource websites if you fall within the kind of prioritized criteria to get the highest incentive level. One, again, kind of quick update is that Eversource currently does not have Make Ready funding for medium heavy duty vehicles, and hoping to reevaluate that in fiscal year 25. So if you're a school district in Eversource territory right now, you won't find that funding source, just because kind of in a good sense, it's been taken advantage of, but it does mean that for now there is not that funding available. So recommend chatting with Eversource and seeing when you might be able to check back in on that funding availability. And then, as I mentioned, wanting to really kind of focus on ACT School Bus, which is the MAPC program. So the program was really conceived in 2022 when EPA came out with the Clean School Bus program, which WRI touched on. But we did have a few other sort of early stage pilots, electric school bus pilots through MAPC. They were, again, kind of smaller scale school districts that were really pretty had resources to put toward these projects, and yet still faced a lot of constraints when it came to funding and technical assistance. So when the federal government announced this huge funding opportunity, we really wanted to make sure that Massachusetts school districts felt prepared to really succeed and to be able to capitalize on the opportunities offered countrywide. So we do have a goal of really supporting schools that receive Clean School Bus funding, but we also want to make sure that our program represents the geographic diversity and ownership model diversity of Massachusetts. So we really want to increase access to clean transportation technologies, and we also want to make sure that our programming is replicable and scalable, meaning that beyond the school districts we're working with now, that there are learning outcomes that we could then use to inform, kind of a wider scale statewide electric school bus program. Go to the next slide, please. So the ACT School Bus program is broken up into two sub-program opportunities. One is an advisory services program, and the other is a fleet deployment program. And the main difference between the two is our advisory services program is not a grant opportunity. It is simply a free advisory services opportunity. So you can receive as a school district customized advisory assistance and help you prepare for full fleet electrification. But this is more geared towards school districts that potentially don't feel like they're quite in financial place or have really thought through everything that goes into a deployment project. So this program is intended to kind of set those school districts up to feel prepared to deploy in the coming few years. And then our deployment program is for school districts that have either secured another funding source or are really in a good place to begin that deployment process, but need some additional funding and potentially technical assistance to make that possible. So our advisory services has ongoing recruitment, and it's basically you just can reach out to us with your interest if you're interested in that program. And there's some contact information at the end of these slides. And the fleet deployment program is a formal grant opportunity. So there is an application. We're currently in a few weeks going to close the application for our third round of fleet deployment, which is intended to complement the 2023 Clean School Bus rebate. So that application does close June 24th, but if you've submitted the Clean School Bus application, this application is intended to look very much in line with that and is geared towards school districts that are either prioritized by Clean School Bus or have received that funding. Kind of we'll go through this fairly quickly, but our advisory services program, just kind of to give you some idea of what you can receive through this program, it's intended to be a customized fleet transition plan. So it is looking at your full fleet and helping you to kind of decide which buses are good candidates to electrify first, which routes you should be looking at, kind of financial modeling, seeing what incentives make most sense for your district. And again, this program does focus on EPA priority districts, but also does have that greater goal of representing the diversity of Massachusetts. So we have about 8 or 9 slots still remaining in advisory services. Again, there's information for how to get in touch if you're interested in that program. But if you fall into any categories under kind of the EPA priority criteria, definitely probably a very good candidate for advisory services. And it also doesn't preclude you from also submitting a deployment application. These programs are aimed at doing slightly different things, so you can always be looking at a full fleet plan while also trying to deploy a small subset of your buses. And then wanted to highlight some of our current deployment projects. So we have a couple rounds of deployment currently operating, including Upper Cape Tech. So excited to see Mary here. But we have 6 projects under the first round of our fleet deployment program. Just about under $9.5 million went to these projects, deploying anywhere from 3 buses all the way up to 35. So different scales of deployment, all receiving technical assistance from our consultant team. And go to the next slide. We also recently awarded an additional 5 school districts to receive the second round of fleet deployment funding. You'll see there are a few districts here who are also in the first round and received EPA funding a second time through the grant program. So you'll see that that funding amount is a little bit decreased, or maybe they're just receiving technical assistance. And that's really because the intent of ACT School Bus is to allow school districts to become more financially autonomous and and also autonomous in, just needing less technical assistance over time. So we're hoping that school districts can, of course, be in this program more than once, but the idea is to scale back that support so that school districts feel kind of confident to run these programs themselves. And then lastly, I think WRI really did a great overview of the Clean Heavy Duty Vehicle program. So maybe we'll skip over that, but just wanting to, again, flag that here and to just say that we're hoping to expand our advisory services program in the future to include more fleets. And we do hope that we'll be able to continue to run rounds of the fleet deployment program as additional rounds of clean school buses come up. And that was it. And I'll put some contact info in the chat.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Orly. And so now I'll turn it over to Mary Burke from the Upper Cape Technical School. And it'd be great if you could just tell us a little bit more about your journey through school bus electrification and talking a bit about how you pulled together different funding and financing sources to procure those buses. Oops, sorry, you're muted. Could you just, there we go.
Hear me now?
Yes.
Well, thank you, Orly and Allie, for inviting me to share our experience here. I'm not sure of the audience what kind of schools you're from, but Upper Cape Cod Technical is a vocational high school during the day, and we have a pretty robust adult and continuing ed program in the evening and online. And within both day and evening programs, we have 15 career and technical programs that include some relevant ones like electrical, automotive, environmental tech, and so forth. So we were really interested in the electric bus opportunity when it first came out a couple of years ago. And we thought we would dip our toe in the water and just apply for one and try that out and see how it went. So we initially applied for funding from the EPA Clean Bus Award, and we received about $400,000 for one bus and one charger. And from that, money begets money. Orly contacted me and let me know about the Mass CEC funding. So we decided to apply for 2 more buses and 2 more chargers to complement the one we were going to receive. So we did receive almost 1.5 million to buy the 2 more and construct a bus port. The difference with Upper Cape was here on campus, all of our buildings and all new construction is done here by the students and the staff as learning opportunities. So we knew that we had some cost saving opportunity by, instead of having to subcontract out a lot of that work, we were going to do it ourselves. So we knew that even though we would have to commit some monies to this project, our students and staff were going to be able to excavate. They're going to be able to build the bus port. They were going to pour concrete. You know, our electrical students would work on automotive. So it seemed to be a good fit. However, we still had to go to school committee and dedicate some funds to the portion that the school would participate in. And that's something that I'm sure you all have thought of, but dependent on the culture of your school committee, I would recommend your superintendents floating that out early as possible, just to get discussion underway in regards to what their commitment would be from the school budget to do that. For us, we are a 5-town district, so it's not just one town is going to have to commit some monies. It's 5 towns, and getting 5 towns to agree on some supplemental funding. So that is a financial priority, I would say, in the beginning of your project, depending on where you're at. So we did that. So though the funding that we accumulated together between the 3 funding sources was something we were going to apply to the total project, the equipment, the buses, the chargers, as well as the building. And we do have an environmental clean energy focus at the school. So we thought we would do some other creative things like put solar panels on the top of the bus port and try to incorporate other kinds of clean energy initiatives to this project. With that comes some other additional funding sources. So Mass CEC has many financial opportunities for other kinds of grants that you could supplement if you plan to do something similar. So I would just put that word out too without going into it. But despite the school being able to build and do a lot of the work itself, we did have to subcontract with a vendor who was actually going to do the installation of the chargers, because the transformers and the upgrades necessary to create a bus port were just a little too advanced for our students. We wouldn't have them work on the charger and the transformers directly. So we subcontracted with a company called Voltrek, which may be familiar to you. They are, I believe, Orly, they work with a couple other partners that we have, and they were fantastic. Because one issue that is difficult, that Orly pointed out, was working with your company, your utility company. For us, that's Eversource, and it's difficult to navigate the relationship with Eversource, to get commitments to come on site, to get work orders approved by Eversource. So you want to partner with somebody who is familiar with working with your utility company, whether that's Eversource or National Grid. I don't think it makes a difference. And Voltrek does have relationships, and we still have significant delays. So that's just another bug I would put in your ear to remember that. But as Orly mentioned, Eversource did have a make ready rebate that we were eligible to apply for. And we did. And we did receive some funding from them, which was really helpful to offset the cost of Voltrek and the supplemental work we needed to do. It required a whole bunch of background work that Orly was significant in helping us navigate in terms of renegotiating our contract in order to be eligible for it. So so those kinds of things you want to try to anticipate and look for in advance, which is, I don't think anybody could have anticipated, but I think it's worth doing. The amount of funding that we received was worth doing the work we had to do. It just, again, delayed us a little bit, and we had to change some things. So that was our experience. So in terms of funding, I think that's probably the most relevant chronological history that Upper Cape went through. And I just have a couple other things that I would point out to you as takeaways that I did. One thing is when I first started looking at the EPA funding, I thought, well, it's unclear if we're considered eligible because of equity justice neighborhoods or equity justice determinations, and whether we had a disadvantaged community that would make us eligible. And again, we're different because we're a 5-district town. So unlike some of you that might be from one town, we had to consider the 5 towns, but that helped us because there were equity justice neighborhoods within that. When I first went on to the equity justice federal map, it just said plug your school in and we'll tell you right away. And of course, Upper Cape didn't come up because vocational schools are not listed. So if your school is not a town of born school, if you're an alternative program or you're, again, just not part of the town, but you may be public, you may not be listed. But again, don't let that deter you. Go at that. So the other part of qualifying for that was that the folks at EPA said to me, okay, well, what is your percentage of disadvantaged students? You have these equity justice neighborhoods, and it's really, really difficult to get at that number because Massachusetts definition of poverty level is higher than the national average. In other words, folks don't have to be as poor as the national average. So we didn't capture our students' income levels below what Massachusetts says is necessary. So again, it was very difficult to become qualified for that, but you can do it. And I would encourage you to persist, because it was just a matter of going through some more data that I'm sure your school has captured for other reasons. But so that was one takeaway. The other thing is the EPA is notoriously difficult to submit paperwork to. You know, their grant submission forms, you may already know this, but it's so difficult. They even tell you, we expect you to have difficulty. So when they say it's due on July 1, make sure you're trying 2 or 3 weeks before that, because you will most likely get your submission rejected for technical reasons, and it's not your fault, but if you miss the due date, you miss the due date. They're great people there to help you navigate that. So just give yourself a big window and try to submit early to EPA. Those are those takeaways. Mass CEC is fantastic with their support. Orly and her team meets with me and the team here monthly, and we go over everything that's going on. For Upper Cape, we didn't need as much technical assistance because we are career and technical folks, but we still needed their consultants, and they have a consultant for every part of the project that you will be navigating, from technical side to the operational side. So take advantage of that and reach out to those folks to help you, because they will. But there is a lot of meetings and paperwork that you have to do. It's just, you need to stay on top of that, or I do. That's my organizational planning. In terms of the budget with Mass CEC, when you negotiate that, and I'm assuming not all of you have done this yet. So when you go through the process of creating a milestone payment plan, which Orly or your representative will go over with you, it's really important to make sure that you create your milestones so that your budget is going to be able to pay for the things in that time frame. So you all, I would assume, will have payroll or commitments to consultants or equipment that you need to buy. And it's really important that you can achieve the amount you need in order to pay for payroll and equipment at the time you plan to do it. So with Upper Cape, you know, and I'm sure all controllers keep their budgets the same, and it's not easy to switch budget lines. So you just have to make sure that if you plan to spend you know, $1 million in the buses and charges, that your milestones are achievable to have that amount in your budget at that time. And that's kind of a guessing game, but you want to make sure you've got enough at that time. The other takeaway was expect delays. We thought we would have our buses operational running and going by now. And of course, there are many things out of your control. So just expect that you will have delays, not to be negative, but that's something I didn't anticipate would have as many delays. And the last takeaway I would say is search rebates and alternative funding sources. They're out there. There's so much funding right now. You just have to think creatively about how your school might utilize those funds to make this bigger project. And also on the tax credits, I was glad that Alice brought that up, because I went at the controller probably 4 times saying, no, we can get tax credits. And they're going to say, no, we can't because we're tax exempt. But it actually is in the form of money. And I think that that's a hard thing for tax exempt controllers to hear, because that's not a tax credit, that's a payment. But in a sense, that's the way that public schools can receive that. And as Alice pointed out, it's a significant amount of money. It's $100,000 per charger and $40,000 per bus. The school budget can seriously benefit from that. So if you get that pushback from your financing team, just make sure they're clear and the superintendent's clear about that, because initially it'll sound like you're not eligible. Those are the major takeaways that we had so far. We're still in the process right now. We've purchased all 3 buses and all 3 chargers. We have them waiting for delivery. We're right now in a holding pattern with Eversource to approve our work orders so that Voltrek can begin the upgrade. We've got our bus port concrete slab poured, and once we get the approval from Eversource, they say it's going to be about 3 weeks for the electricians to do their work, and then I think we'll receive delivery. So we're hoping sometime over the summer we're going to get the buses, get them in place, and start our training with hopes for using them in the early fall.
Great, that's so exciting. Thank you so much for sharing all of that wisdom. Definitely lots of steps along the way. It's great to learn from folks that are trailblazers in the electric school bus space in Massachusetts. I know you have to head out, but I guess just one question for me, and then I can open up if there's any other questions, is do you remember like when you started thinking about or planning for electric school buses, and do you have a sense of kind of how many years or months does it take from like first planning to the rollout?
I want to say it was 2021. We got our award from the EPA in the fall of 2022. But I believe we first started seeing some and hearing some buzz about it in 2021. And we discussed that here again, our environmental folks and our automotive folks, and I write a lot of grants for the adult ed program. So and our adult ed students will be participating in this. So we thought, why not? Let's just try one. And again, that was 3 years ago now. So we got the award in the fall of 2022. And then the Mass CEC award was in the summer of 2023 when it was finalized. Although, Oli, I don't know, we probably talked for a year or more going into it, and before we got rolling. So it was years, plural. Yeah.